I was dying of Lyme's disease. The holographic breathing, the first thing that happened with the holographic breathing that made a massive change right from the beginning was that I could feel my brain breathing and I could feel the cranial fluid moving. And because I was a cranial therapist or cranial sacral therapist, I had this image of the cranial fluid was around the brain, and this is what is pictured as the cranial fluid, is that it's around the brain, around the spine, in ventricles within the brain, and a thin ventricle down the middle of the spine, and that's kind of it. There's that fluid and the rest is brain. So I had that image. But with the holographic breathing, I'd first go to that and I'd feel that, but instantly it would move on, and it was as if the whole brain was cranial fluid and the whole spine was cranial fluid, and that the cranial fluid flowed off down through the nerves. And that broke this internal image. See, had that image that I'd learnt from the anatomy imprinted on me, and that was bad for my health. Because as soon as I felt it, as everything was cranial fluid and that it was flowing out through the nerves, I could just feel all of these toxins releasing from my brain, down the spine and out through the nerves. And I could feel this deep tiredness. It's more than tired, it's like death. Lyme disease feels like death. It feels like death on wheels. It feels like you're dying. It's more than tired. And I could feel that sensation leaving. I think that was the neurotoxins building up from the Lyme disease, and visualizing it and being with it in that way was allowing those toxins to leave. And I could never go back to that picture of how it's shown in the anatomy books, how it was shown. I don't know, I think they still teach it in the cranial schools. One of my main things at the minute is to stop. I would like it if that image was stopped being taught in any healing modality, because I don't think it's doing a service to people. And I felt it as that, and could not go back to the other image, because if I was doing holographic breathing and felt that image of the books, I literally could not breathe. And then as soon as I felt the whole brain full of cranial fluid, everything cranial fluid, and flowing out through, suddenly I could take this deep breath, I could feel it all ventilating, and I could feel it detoxifying. I just felt it just leaving and leaving. And then later, when I came to teach it, I started looking into it. And I found out they depict the brain as solid, but actually, it's a shame I don't have pictures to show you. Oh, hang on, I have. So when I looked into it, the brain wasn't solid, it's 90% fluid. You see all the glial cells, it's all fluid. This is a ventricle. This is in the body of the brain. You see, they're all connected by tentacles, and this is all fluid. And when I researched it, this fluid that they call interstitial fluid, and the fluid that's created in the ventricles, exactly the same thing. And they're based in water. They're 99% water, 1% oxygen, glucose and salt. They're exactly the same fluid. So the whole brain and the whole ventricles were exactly the same. They were cranial fluid down. So I was right. And then when I looked at the spine, I realized that the myelinating glial cells that make the myelin sheath become capillaries. So not only can that fluid flow off down through the nerves, the myelinating glial cells make capillaries to channel the cranial fluid off through the nerves so it can stay as cranial fluid. But I also discovered that they manufacture cranial fluid, that very same thing. So my internal image was absolutely correct, how I was feeling inside. And so that is what the articles are about. And then later, Let's just see, just show it. Also, they say it can't flow off down through the nerves, but absolutely, there's nothing to stop it. Here's the spinal cord is here. There's no membrane. There is nothing to stop this fluid flowing off down through the nerves. And all of these, this isn't quite right, because as it gets into the nerve, the myelinating glial cells join together and make connections between each other. So these become capillaries for that cranial fluid to travel down through the nerves. Let's just find, it's a little bit ad hoc. And this is them just, so it can all flow off, and there's thousands of tentacles joining each one, so the fluid can just move from one to the other. And these, you can't put it in the picture, these are 100 times as long as they're wide, so they go for a long time before their connection. So the capillary action are perfect to make capillary action. They actually create cranial fluid. So what I was feeling and seeing in myself, very likely true. And then when I went back to look at how it was described, I got really, really annoyed, because it's not just got loopholes in it. It is absolutely 100% impossible to work how they describe. It really is. It just ridiculously, it is, they cannot, even now, they cannot measure the flow of cranial fluid. So whenever that picture was made, they definitely couldn't then. But whoever made that picture, I have to say that either they're total idiot because it makes absolutely no sense. It is completely against the laws of science. It is completely against the laws of nature. Anybody who understands the fundamentals of science and nature and looked into the mechanics can say that's rubbish. That cannot work like that. So I don't know who made that picture, and I don't know how it got in the anatomy books, but that picture, the name, the myelinating glials, the myelin sheath, because the myelin sheath just pictures this dry sheath rather than a capillary that carries water. So if you've got MS and you've got a picture of the myelin sheath as this dry, old, tired thing, that's not a very good visualization for you. But if you've got MS and you can feel this flow of fluid and these myelinating glial cells as rivers, that gives you a completely different image. If you have an image of the blood-brain barrier, just the name gives an image, nothing can get in and nothing can get out. I'd heard all of these things. It's hard to detoxify the brain because of the blood-brain barrier. The people who said it didn't know what they're talking about, but people from that word have that image and it blocks off this whole thing. The actual image that is being taught in cranial schools and osteopathic schools, and it's detrimental to mankind. And I think it's stopping our ascension and evolution. I don't think it's an accident. I don't think the scientists went out of their way to do it wrong. I'm sure they had. But I think somehow the energies around put something in place to stop this center of our brain evolving, because as soon as you start viewing it as it actually is, the third eye starts opening, the connection to the higher self starts opening, comes down through this whole vortex and travels out through the, naturally, just by viewing it in that way. So for me, there's been a block there, and I've become passionate to spread that. And in those 3 articles, I've got one article, if you read through it, and I've done it as questions, you will see that it is impossible for it to work as is. It has no lymph. They describe the whole central nervous system as having no lymph, which is ridiculous. It is impossible. And the actual flow of fluid through the whole brain and through the spine is the lymph making its way to the exits, which are the nerves. So there's no nerves in the cerebrum, which is 85% of the central. So you've got this mass of cranial lymph making its way slowly to the exits, and that is the motion is just down with gravity through the body. And in the horse's tail, which is all nerves at the bottom of the spine, it's just spreading out through the nerves, and it's going out through the nerves, through the myelin capillaries. The myelin capillaries are making more cranial fluid, and it changes the whole image. And if you don't even breathe with it, if you don't even do healing, if you had that image rather than the myelin sheath, the blood-brain barrier, it would change your health. People would automatically start evolving and ascending, and this whole area of their brain would start working.